Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is actually a very special episode of Kubrick Voices, one of our podcast series that I'm very grateful to host. But this special episode of Kubrick Voices is actually a live webinar recording for Black History Month. That's the month of February here in the US. And we've got a very special episode today. A lot of audience participation and a lot of different voices involved. So before I give too much away, I'm going to pass over to Dana, our new head of DEI at Kubrick, to explain how this is all going to work.
Hello, everyone, Kubrick Massive and guests. I'm Dana, as Camilla said, and with me are Christine and Natalie, who are two of our Kubrick consultants who are based in the US. Happy Black History Month and welcome. The theme of this year's Black History Month in the US is resistance. And resistance is really an act of power. It's saying that you're unwilling to accept things as they are, and it's an expression of a desire for change. And if we are really thinking about creating a truly anti-racist society, resistance is key. We all need to be able and ready to step up and resist when things aren't right. But how can you even begin to resist if you don't understand when and where you need to step up? And that's what today's session is about. It's about perspective. And to help us gain this perspective, we'll be using Reddit. True story. During the pandemic, when people were feeding their sourdough starters and baking banana bread and all those things, I discovered Reddit. Right? If you don't know what Reddit is, it calls itself the front page of the internet, whatever that means. It's really a social media site that's organized into communities, and each little community is called a subreddit, right? If you're into gardening, there's a subreddit or community for that. If you like cats, there's a subreddit or community for that. If you like making fun of people who post ridiculous things on LinkedIn, there is a subreddit for that. And in each subreddit, you can find a community of people who are interested in those things alongside you, and you can post comments and engage in dialogue with them. It's great. My absolute favorite subreddit or community is called AITA. And on AITA, people share a scenario from their lives, which is typically something a little controversial where they aren't sure if they're right or wrong, and they submit themselves to the judgment of the internet. And as I started to get into AITA and started to read the scenarios, I realized that lots of the scenarios are centered on matters of diversity and inclusion, and we'll be exploring some of those today. And here's how the session is going to work. We have handpicked some Reddit scenarios, which are all centered on the experiences of Black people in the workplace. I will give the scenario a spicy read to begin with. What is a spicy read? Trust me, you're going to find out in a minute. While I'm reading, please feel free to react. The chat box is open. If I'm saying something and you're like, that person is crazy, you can type that in. If you're feeling a bit of, oh no, they did not, you can type that in, live react with us while we're doing the reading. That's cool. Or you can put your reactions in as well. Once I'm done reading, the discussion begins and you get to weigh in as well. So it's not just us talking at you. You can chime in as well. I'll read some of the comments out loud. But that having been said, please know that commenting is optional. I want you to feel as comfortable as possible in this session. And if that means that you just want to listen and take in what's happening, that's okay too. The way that you choose to enjoy the session is the best way and the right way. So just do what feels comfortable for you. Just because I said bring some spice in doesn't mean you have to, right? It's optional. And please don't worry if the things you're commenting or what you want to say doesn't align with everyone else's perspective and you have a different take. For me, an amazing thing about AITA is sometimes I go in thinking a certain way and I'm ready to land that judgment. But then when I get into the comment section, there's something in there that's a completely different perspective that blows my mind and opens my eyes to something else. Maybe that might happen here. As we are commenting in the chat, can we please try to avoid using words like obviously And it's clear that, because what might be obvious and clear to you may not be obvious and clear to others, right? So just say your perspective. And finally, can we please also remember that while this subreddit is called AITA and this session is called AITI, yeah, issue, am I the issue? Our aim today is not to label people as A's or as issues overall. We are hearing a few paragraphs about them, a snapshot of their lives at a particular point in time that doesn't sum up the totality of who they are. So let's comment about their words and their actions and not on who they are as a person, right? So if you're still with me, just to recap, I'm going to give every scenario a spicy read. You can put your comments into the chat if you have some, and we'll go to the panel for their comments as well. And we are ready for scenario 1. Are you ready? If you're ready, just say a little yes in the chat so we know you're there and I know you can hear me and I'm not talking to myself. Are we ready for scenario 1?
Woo.
Is
Natalie,
anyone out
Christine?
there? We lost them, Camilla. Oh my goodness, no one. Yay! Okay, awesome, excellent, and thank you. Okay, so scenario 1 is AITI for interrupting a woman of color. You ready? It starts with a note. Note, this was pre-COVID when classes were face-to-face. At the time, I, white male, was a 29-year-old early career professor, same as my colleague Rachel, 30 at the time, and is Black. In our first year, I suggested we co-teach a class. Rachel agreed, so we co-taught in our second year. When the semester was over, we discussed how it went, and Rachel said it was an awful experience. I was stunned and asked what she meant. She said I constantly interrupted and undermined her. She said that often when she spoke, I'd jump in and take over the lecture, which conveyed to the students that I thought I was more knowledgeable or competent. She always called me Dr., my last name, in front of students, while I always called her Rachel, even though she always corrected me. I said I was just trying to keep things casual because I don't mind when students use my first name. She sighed and said, as a white male, you're automatically given respect. I have to earn it. I don't have the luxury of being casual like you do. Otherwise, people at work wouldn't take me seriously. I did recall that throughout the semester, she would call me out for interrupting. She only did this one-on-one, never in front of students. I always apologized and explained that I can be impulsive because I'm just really enthusiastic. I apologized again in our meetings. She said, I appreciate that you always apologize, but I shouldn't have to keep reminding you to adhere to common courtesy. Also, if you were truly remorseful, you would have made a genuine effort to stop interrupting. I truly didn't mean to disrespect Rachel or undermine her, but my wife says that's not an excuse, and I'm still an a-hole for how I behaved. Even though this happened several years ago, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Am I the issue? Well, there we go. Scenario 1. Is he the issue, or is he just a poor, innocent man who wants to keep things casual and have good vibes in the classroom? Natalie, I'm coming to you first. What do you think?
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I read the scenario a couple times because I just wanted to get everything right. And I do think it's the issue. I'm going to start off with that. I have my reasons, so hear me out. So he had been asked to refer to her by her correct title more than once, like on more than one occasion, and has been corrected by her several times and still continues to not use it. I think beyond just the discussion of like how race plays into this, it's just common courtesy. If someone wants to be referred to a certain way, that you respect that. And then going on, he constantly interrupts and undermines her, even though she calls him out for it. This can be really annoying. I personally don't mind if you think that what you have to say is more important and revolutionary and is going to change the world. You can make your turn, because you will get to say it. You're both teaching the class, and it's important to make space for your co-professor to voice their opinions as well. And if you constantly speak over them, your students can get the wrong idea. And he would go on to apologize, but then do it again with no change in his actions. And I feel like that's not a real apology, because if you're not making the effort to change, then how do I know that you're actually apologetic, that you actually care?
Awesome. Can we just pause there for a second, because I feel like that's really important. Making an apology is cool and all, but it's what happens after you make the apology that really counts. Are you going to change your behavior? Are you going to do things differently? Because if not, then it really is just empty words, right? We have a comment from Ty. They say, you've been told multiple times. At this point, it's like you not taking her feelings and wants into consideration. Maybe I read that a bit spicier than Ty meant it, but I felt it in that moment. Christine, girl, what do you think?
Yeah, I would have to agree with what Natalie has already said, that I do think he is the issue in this case. As you've already mentioned, like, it's one thing to apologize, but if it continues to be repeated behavior, then is that really an apology? And it also just shows, like, I think it's really disrespectful, and it shows the students that dynamic is not equal, and that there's someone in that dynamic that has or is perceived to have high, like, greater power, because again, with the small things of not using her proper title or just constantly interrupting her, it gives the illusion that what he has to say, it holds more value, and that shouldn't be the case. And I think, again, it comes, like already said, it comes down to common courtesy. I think a lot of times people think they listen, and we really don't. I know everyone gets excited to, like, kind of put their perspective onto something when someone else is talking, or try to relate to it, or even, bring in their own perspective. But sometimes we just need to, like, all step back and just listen, and not always need to position ourselves in someone else's perspective or experience.
I totally hear you, Christine. And Angela agrees. They say, if this was a first instance, I think Rachel could forgive him, but actions speak louder than words, and he didn't change his behavior, so he didn't seem to respect Rachel's perspective or feelings. Now, when I read this, what really amazed me about the whole thing is that he asked Rachel, she answered him. Then he asked his wife, she answered him. And then he was still like, no, I can't possibly be in the wrong. So now I must ask strangers on Reddit, because he's so convinced that, like, actually he's totally right in this scenario. And that there isn't an issue here. Okay. I want to go back to something from the scenario itself to find out how you feel about it. So there's a certain point where she says, as a white male, you're automatically given respect. I have to earn it. Can we take a moment and just reflect on that? Do you agree with it? I'll go back to Natalie and then back to you, Christine.
I actually had a whole point on that. I definitely agree. Okay, my point was, as Rachel said, he can afford to be casual and still get the respect he deserves. He never has to question that.
Mhm.
But for people of color, and especially women of color, we move around the world differently. We're always questioning how people are perceiving us because it could be different.
Mhm.
And especially, like, we have to sort of ask for that respect always. We have to demand that respect because it's not a given that we're going to get it. And that's what
Mhm.
Rachel's trying to do, and he just simply wouldn't give it to her, no matter how much she asked. So that was also like a very important point for me. And I think he needs to like reach inside himself and just do some introspection.
Totally agree with that. Agreed. And Fabian's weighing in as well. In this scenario, there's a big piece around doing this in front of an audience, the students, who looks up to them as role models. And so it can have an impact not only on Rachel, but actually the group is receiving a wider message, which I completely agree with. They are taking away things from that dynamic, whether it's intended or not. And he's actually shaping the way that they perceive not only Rachel, but women of color in wider academia. Thank you for that, Fabia. And Charlotte says, when we listen, we need to really listen without being defensive. And I think this is a reaction because he is being really defensive in the scenario, right? Listening to learn and listening to try to prove ourselves are both two different things. And I completely and totally agree with that. Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for chiming in. Any last thoughts, Christine?
Yeah, kind of going back to the point that Natalie brought up, and this idea or this concept of constantly having to prove a space which is traditionally white, and as a person of color and thinking of inhabiting it, I could say you definitely do have to prove yourself all the time. Just thinking of my collegiate and professional experience post-college, there have been times people have questioned like, oh, are you an athlete? Is that why you're here? Oh, you must be on scholarship. And I'm like, well, no to both. But also I don't go up to you and question, are you a legacy student, or did your parents give a large donation towards, the school? Because I assume you're here because of you're supposed to be here. And but at times I'm not met with that courtesy of, it's always a question of, well, maybe you're the diversity hire, or maybe like you're here for statistic reasons to, make a company look good. And, sometimes I'm told those things with good intentions, sometimes curiosity, and other times, you know, because the person who's asking perceives that I'm not supposed to be in that space.
Mhm.
And so I could really relate to what she says, because sometimes it's just, you can't be casual because there's this constant need to prove that you're supposed to be within that space.
I completely agree with that as well. I can't tell you the number of times I've been called a diversity hire in my life. It's super annoying. And I feel like I often have to lead with, I'm amazing at my job. I just happen to be Black, right? Right? Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. And so I completely and totally agree with that. Now, for everyone else who's out there listening, we threw you an easy, that was a softball for the first scenario, right? It was pretty gentle. We all seem to kind of agree that he was a little bit of an issue in that scenario. Maybe the second one that we're going on to won't be quite as easy to take a stance on. Let's see. Moving on to scenario 2, AITA issue for not using my real name. All right, the chat is open now, so we can expect your live reactions as I'm reading. If something's popping up, do write it in the chat. If you have thoughts, do let us know. Okay. My parents moved to the US from Africa, country not provided for anonymity. And usually when people read my last name, their brain short circuits for a second before they ask me how it is pronounced. When I started at my firm several years ago, my boss asked me and I told him. He tried 2 times more before I said, just Smith is fine. Over time, everyone has just called me Smitty as a nickname. On paper, everything is my legal name. My parents came to visit and I took them out to lunch. A co-worker walked by and called out to me as Smitty. I talked for a second and introduced him to my parents as Mr. and Mrs. last name, and he left. My dad asked about Smitty, and I just said it's a nickname at work because our last name is so hard to pronounce. He got so angry at me and said I should be proud of where I come from. I told him it's just a nickname and it doesn't mean anything, but he's really upset, won't listen, and says I'm disrespecting my heritage. AITA. There's the scenario. Is he the issue? Is he disrespecting his heritage? Is his father the issue? Is his boss and co-workers the issue? Christine, your thoughts?
So this one's a bit tricky to answer. I don't think anyone really is like, and is the issue. I think the issue really stems from how we treat when we don't know how to pronounce someone's name and just like all that's encompassed in that. So for me, at least, my parents, like when they like were determining what to name me, they specifically chose not to give me a name that was closer to like where we're from. Rather, they said, here's a plain name, Christine King. Like no one's gonna ever question like when you put it on a job application, and no one's ever gonna mispronounce it. And I think what people fail to realize, the issue isn't necessarily mispronouncing a name. Like there are going to be people you come across that their names are based on a specific language that you may not be accustomed to. So phonetically, you will have difficulty pronouncing it. That's a fact. And there's nothing wrong with mispronouncing a name. The issue is how do you deal with that when you mispronounce someone's name? So again, I've had friends who have names that I've never heard and until I met them. And I've asked them, how do you pronounce your name? And then with some time, I learned how to pronounce it correctly. But a lot of times people don't take that initiative or even effort to try to pronounce the name correctly. Like not too long ago, I was in a professional setting and I was with someone who had a name, very short name, 4-letter name, 2 syllables, like not a hard name at all, but the way it's spelled is it's said a little different. So sometimes people mistake it. And one of the people who was in this professional setting was someone of a leader or a couple years older, and they pronounced the name wrong. And then that person corrected them and they pronounced it again wrong. And then that person corrected them. And then instead of being like, I'm sorry that I'm pronouncing your name wrong, they scoffed and said, oh, well, let's move on. And then when the conversation continued, they pronounced the name wrong. See, that's an issue, because not only are you pushing, names are so important for many people, and it's like very tied to their identity. So if you are going ahead and being the person to like implement like a different name for them, whether that's pronunciation or even shortening their name without their consent and without them being okay with that, that's a problem. Because at that point, you're making it more convenient for yourself at the expense of hurting someone else because you couldn't pronounce their name. And like, that's like besides like looking at someone, that's kind of the first thing you know about someone, like their name. And if that's your first impression, you not being able to pronounce a name correctly, that shows, and like not taking the effort or even apologizing for it, that shows a lot on you. And in that scenario, you are the issue.
I concur, but in this particular scenario, his boss tried it twice. How many times is enough? Is there a number? I'm waiting to hear from you in the chat, but like, is there an enough number? So he must have tried actually 3 times, because it said he tried twice more. So he would have done it once and then it was like, no, dude. And then he tried again and then it was probably like, not quite. And then he tried one more time and then he was like, you know what, just call me Smitty. So is there a magic number? Also, by the way, it's important to note that the boss wasn't the one who nicknamed, right? Smitty gave, well, he said Smith, but then it became Smitty, and he seems pretty into it, right? He doesn't seem to be upset about it. He seems to have leaned in, and I feel like, even though it's not explicitly said, he likes it. So I mean, is there a magic number of times you try? Is that unlimited? And then if somebody says to you, you know what, just call me X or Y or whatever, then is that really betraying your heritage? I don't know. I'm going to the chat. Okay, there's several things coming in. So the first one is, being proud of where you come from is independent of what your last name is. Yes, there might be heritage indicated in the name, but if a name is hard to pronounce for someone, I think a nickname is inevitable. If the nickname is something the person writing is comfortable with, as in this situation, I personally don't see an issue, right? Because in this situation, the person wasn't like, you better say my name right. They were like, you know what, call me Smith, and that's cool. I have a whole thing about names. So you will see, even right here on Zoom, I have phonetically spelled out my name because people pronounce my name wrong all the time. It's not my last name, it's my first name. And it really is important for me. I mean, it just grates when people call me Donna. Kubrick people, don't call me Donna. It annoys me. And so I spell it out phonetically everywhere because it is really important to me. And I don't think it's that hard to pronounce when you wrap your mind around it. So I say things to people, Dana, like the dawn of a new day, so that they'll remember, or something like that. We have more stuff coming into the chat. There isn't a number. If I'm not comfortable with the way my name is pronounced, I think an effort should be made till it's done. Right? But that's one person's perspective. And if it's that important to you and you keep reminding the person, then fair enough, right? Agreed. Okay, another comment. I don't think the writer is the issue, nor do I think the employer is the issue, which was your starting point, Christine, but it's an issue of bridging that uncomfortableness and attempting to get a name right. I don't think either party should have shied away from trying to understand the correct name. I have had people try to sweep their real names aside, and I urge them to use their real name because they should be proud of their background. I have many times mispronounced, but it's about the effort and respect of trying to get it right all the time, right? Another comment. I can understand not wanting to deal with correcting people's pronunciation all the time. On the other hand, I can see why his family would be proud of their heritage. Within the parent-child dynamic, I don't think there is anyone who is the issue, which again is where we came in. Fabien, it's a tricky one, feeling to have to choose between integrating more easily or reinforcing one's identity, which really is what we're talking about here. This is starting to get spicy and exciting. Instinct would be that everyone should be able to decide for themselves how they wish to be named, which I completely agree with, right? Natalie, we hadn't come to you yet. What's your 2p or 2 cents worth on the topic?
Thank you. I was going to say, I actually really agree with the last point that was raised. Everyone should be able to decide for themselves how they wish to identify in this world, because, you know, as I said before, everyone's experience is different. I really relate to this scenario actually, because I moved here only 5 years ago, and I grew up in a whole other continent actually. And so when I came here, I had like different mannerisms. I had a really heavy accent, and this world was so like different to me. And I think you just get tired of sticking out all the time, and you're always reminded of that when someone is constantly mispronouncing your name. So I don't blame him for wanting to change it to make it easier, not only for others but for himself. And I understand where the parents are coming from too. It's like, you know, you're sort of erasing your heritage in a way. But I don't think it's that. I think he's so proud of his heritage. It's just that sometimes you just want to make it easy on yourself. And I also don't like people butchering my name. My name's not like necessarily hard to pronounce, but whenever people would hear my accent, they'd always ask me where I'm from. I'd say Kenya. They'd ask me if we go to school on elephants. I don't know where that comes from or why you think people are riding elephants in 2023. But that like I had to always answer those questions. So I ended up actually, well, my accent, you know, went away. I didn't do that like consciously. But I feel like it was my way of adapting to being in a whole new like place.
Mm-hmm.
And when people ask where I was from, I would say New York because it's just easier. I don't have to deal with all those questions. I'm not erasing the fact that I'm from Kenya. I'm very proud to be Kenyan, as you can tell. But it just made it easier for me. So I don't think he's the issue here.
Cool. Going back to the chat, as a person whose name is being mispronounced all the time, I think it depends on you. If you are comfortable with being called an altered version of your name. I don't like being called by another name, but my boyfriend, it's BF. I'm going with boyfriend. I don't think it's best friend. Okay, that is in the same boat, just introduces himself by an English version of his name since we moved to the UK. So again, coming out in favor of personal preferences. Try until you get it right is another comment. People may feel pressured to fit in or adjust their identities in order to avoid drawing too much attention to themselves. So I think it is very important to note that there are some people who actually love their nickname and they're like, this is more me and I'm into it. But there are a subset of people who are like, you know what, it's just easier. I'm tired. I can't be bothered. And maybe a bit more effort would be great. Okay, I'm going back to reading. I think we have a duty to make an effort to make people feel comfortable to bring their true identities to work, especially when in a position of seniority. It sets the tone for the rest of the company and employees to follow suit and show respect for differences and diversity. Awesome. Alyssa's chimed in. I do find that often people exaggerate how hard a name is to pronounce simply because it's unfamiliar. The attempts and exaggeration of how hard a name is to pronounce may play a factor. I totally agree with you. And I'm going to confess something to you. There's a secret part of me that thinks there is a whole bunch of people who learn the most difficult footballers' names, right? Some of them aren't easy at all. They're quite complicated. And everybody's like, yeah, this player, and they get it perfectly right. Okay, some of that is because they're hearing it all through the match and blah, blah, blah. But if you can manage that, you can manage mine. I feel, I vary between the two things. I mean, in this situation, I feel like Smitty's leaned in, so that's cool. But I do feel like sometimes when we go, oh, forget it. I mean, come on. Are you getting those footballers' names right? Because if you are, I'm side-eyeing you. I am giving you the side eye. Okay. Another comment. As a former teacher, I encountered this all the time. Many of the students I taught had English names. Their parents had told them it would look better on CVs. They had gone through primary school with the wrong name because it was easier for everyone to say. We got those students to use their real names and educate everyone on the phonetic pronunciation and the meaning behind the name. For example, many names are chosen for a reason and often have a special meaning, ranging from the day of the week they were born through to whether they are a twin. It should be a point of education and pride, but wait for it, this is juicy. It should be the choice of the person whose name it is to choose how they wish to be identified, not because it's easier or looks better on a CV. Mic drop. I think that is an excellent place to conclude scenario 2. And I also want to say thank you so much for everyone who's taking in the time to message us and to contribute to the discussion. It helps keep it lively and interesting. It's really good debate, and getting people's different perspectives and lived experience through is what this is about, and it's so important. So please do keep doing the same. Okay, now scenario 3, buckle up. AITA for pointing out that my daughter's tech internship is a diversity program. My daughter, 19F, did an internship, F is for female, because daughter, yeah? Did an internship at a prestigious tech company this summer. We are very proud of her, of course. A family friend came over for dinner. His son is a similar age and also studying computer science, but is struggling to get any internships despite taking much more advanced courses than my daughter. Please imagine violins playing in the background as I read this. His son, who I know personally and is a great kid, has been programming since he was 12 and has made lots of programming side projects as his hobby. I pointed out that the internship my daughter did was a diversity initiative that only accepts minorities. I only pointed this out because I didn't want him or his son to feel too disappointed about not getting an internship. Additionally, my daughter has only taken one computer science class prior to getting the internship. And so far, she doesn't seem passionate about it. So I thought it was valid to point out that if it wasn't a diversity program, likely someone with more experience like his son would have gotten it. My daughter and wife think I'm a total AH. My daughter said it was belittling and humiliated her. She's now refusing to talk to me. But from my perspective, all I did was point out something that was true. AITA. Natalie, girl, you're up.
I'm a firm believer.
We have a comment, ouch. Ouch is the
Ouch
comment
indeed.
in the chat. You can use that as your jumping off point.
I am a firm believer in really thinking about what you're about to say and how it's going to come off before you speak. Just because something is true doesn't mean it could always be said. And no matter how you intend it to come across, it's going to sound really offensive. And I can imagine being the daughter and sitting there and hearing your dad say, well, you know, she brought her in because she's a minority. Like, she has an internship because she's a minority. That's not the only reason why. And these programs are actually very important because without them, we might not get as much exposure, and we might not even get to develop that interest in tech. So they help level the playing field in a way. And I feel like him pointing them out that way to make someone else feel better about not getting it, it just reduces it to like minorities getting special treatment, which is definitely not the case. So my point overall is that he could have made that son feel better. But you know, he will get the internship. I believe that. But he could have made him feel better without bringing up his daughter's program in such a disparaging way. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Natalie. Christine, weighing in.
Yeah, like I definitely agree with Natalie said. I'm like very much side-eyeing the dad for saying that, because why would you put your daughter down to uplift someone else who's not your child? I mean, so I already think he's an issue, is an issue for that reason. But I think it's really hard to kind of really understand it, because I think this specific scenario plays a lot into what we see a lot, especially in America, with this idea of like affirmative action, and where people feel this fear that jobs are being given to minorities rather than based on merits. And it's, again, people have very strong feelings about it from on either side. But as Natalie said, I think what people sometimes fail to recognize is that these programs are not meant to like put people of color in a more superior position and put people who are not minorities down, or you know, be this superpower for minorities. But in reality, it really is leveling the playing field, because when you take a second and pull back and look at it from a very macro level, you will see why these programs exist. They're not because we just want to put people of color in power now, but more so to kind of, again, even the playing field and break down those old systems that put people of color in worse positions. And when you think of like things like inequality in education for people of color, and just other stuff like financial barriers and just educational barriers, you see the importance of programs such as these. And I feel that, again, it's like there are many situations where people I feel like when this conversation always comes up, people take this really honed in approach saying like we live in a very merit-based society, which is not true. Like nepotism exists in all fields and we see it all the time. And like even when it comes to hiring, a lot of the times people get hired is because they knew someone at that company. So like when you really think about it, like how do we really live in like a society that's merit-based? So I don't really have, I take issue with what the dad said a lot, but to the bigger picture or theme, I really don't know. I don't have a great answer for that.
I think that was a great answer, actually. And when I was reading it, I thought, does he know how many people applied for this program and that she was successful? How do we know that the reason that she hasn't taken more computer science classes isn't because she was not encouraged or she felt held back in some way? And this is the thing that it's going to open the door for her to be able to pursue this career. Does he know how hard she worked in this internship as well? I just feel like it was unnecessary to go down that route and to try and reinforce sort of negative stereotypes. And I can't imagine how I would feel as a daughter on the receiving end of that. Oh, starting to get chats coming through. Let me go to the chat. Charlotte's up. If I had £1 or $1 for every time I have seen nepotistic intern hires, I would be able to retire early. Affirmative action is so important to level the playing field. Thank you. Another one's come through privately. In this case, it's important to think about why diversity programs exist in the first place. They're aimed at creating opportunities for demographics that do not usually get exposure or access to excel in or even learn about STEM-related topics. Thank you very much. Angela's there. In the chat, the father did not need to put down his daughter's success in that way. She obviously got it for a reason, so she deserves to be there. I'm going to pause. There is totally a thing about Black people and people from other minoritized ethnic groups worrying about being able to take up space and constantly questioning if they deserve to be in a particular arena. And she is now going to keep questioning whether or not she deserves to be there, which is like a really important point of context for this, right? Continuing to read. These programs are meant to provide an equitable playing field for diverse backgrounds to break into notoriously difficult industries. Thank you so much. And from Fabian in the main chat, the conversation could have gone to discussing chances of employment post-internship, where the program the daughter just took part in might have got her chances of employment closer to the chances of employment the son has without the internship. And then might have made for awkward dinner chat though, which I totally and completely agree with. But yes, daughter was totally thrown under the bus in that particular scenario. Dad, you're on the naughty step. For me anyway, those of you who are listening may not wholeheartedly agree. Right, I think we have time for one more. It's a very light-hearted one to end on. And I'm just going to read that. And it says, AITA issue for using shea butter. If you don't know what shea butter is, you're going to find out in a minute. I went to university with a huge number of international students. For freshman year, the university randomly placed us into rooms, and my roommate was an international student from the Ivory Coast. She and I weren't best friends or anything, but we grew closer during our first year and ended up rooming together for 2 years until I decided to move off campus. I was always mesmerized by her hair and how clear her skin is, not in the inappropriate, let me touch and feel way, but always commenting on how beautiful her hair and skin were. I asked about her routine, and she told me she used mostly natural products such as aloe vera and shea butter on her hair and face. She taught me a lot about these things, and my skin and hair started blossoming. She moved back to the Ivory Coast after graduation, and we still keep in touch. I have a YouTube channel with about 5,000 subscribers. I have been getting comments about my hair and skin and people asking which products I use. I decided to do a video response to demonstrate. I spoke to my current roommate about it. She's Afro-Latin, and she told me to check my privilege. She said making the video is cultural appropriation since it will take the shine away from the many people of color with YouTube beauty channels. She also said my usage of these items will make them popular and drive up the prices to the point where people of color can't afford them. I explained to her that I will now make sure to mention where I learned my techniques. And since my subscribers aren't so many, it won't really take away from anyone else. She called me a colonizer, and our friendship, it does say that. She called me a colonizer, and our friendship has been tense since AITA here. Christine, can you get over the giggles? I'm coming to you first.
Yeah, so maybe this is a hot take, but I don't think she is the issue here. But I do think that her friend or roommate telling her like, hey, like pointing out made sense. But do I think she's an issue? No. And I also don't really think it's that much of cultural appropriation, because I use shea butter, and like I let my roommates who are white use my shea butter, and they like it because like no one likes crackling skin. But I think that my opinion on that might just be because of this specific product, but I think kind of switching it to a different product, but something that was in recent news about like this TikTok influencer named Alex Earl and her using Miriel product, which is from a Black owned company for Black hair. And people called her out the same way, saying like, you shouldn't be promoting this on your platform because it's going to drive up sales. And it's also because it's not for you. But the difference between and the one in this scenario was that she was using it improperly. She was putting it in her hair and then washing it out. And it's a hair oil. You're not supposed to put it in your hair and wash it out. But you would know that if it was meant for you. And like, again, like not the person who made it, but people who are other influencers in the Black hair community came out and said like, that's not for your hair. And that's not me gatekeeping. That's not me trying to, be mean, but it's like, it's not going to benefit your hair in any way. If anything, it's going to make your hair very greasy. And if you have thinner hair, like it's going to be a detriment. But because she saw it as, I can make money off of this. The issue is like when you take a product, no knowledge of it, and then you kind of like exploit it sometimes. And I think that's really when cultural appropriation comes in and like when it becomes an issue. I think if you want to use certain products that don't necessarily come from your background or try something new, you should do your research, know if it works for you and not going to be detrimental. And then if you're like a content producer like this person, just like say where you got it from. And if it truly is something you use, just link where you got it from, how you knew it, and there shouldn't be an issue. And I mean, that's my opinion on it.
And you are supported in that opinion. So we've just had a message come into the chat that says, is the writer the issue? No, she just wants clear skin. LOL. I think her Afro-Latin roommate is reacting a little too strongly. Of course, you should always give credit to your sources or give recommendations where appropriate. I think it's important for the audience to know as well, there is no global shortage on shea butter. We're not running out. Like, it's everywhere. You can find it. So there's not a scarcity. It's like, it literally is everywhere. And I don't even know if it's particularly a product that's meant for the Black community. We use it, but technically everyone can use it. And you can even use it in cooking. And I mean, for me, a ubiquitous product, but we're going to Natalie for your thoughts.
I was going to say, I really agree with Christine and even Andrew on this issue. It's like an argument of like cultural appropriation versus like appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it would be appropriation if you went on to make her own like shea butter infused line and was like, here's this product that I fully found by myself and created, and like I'm gonna make money off of it. I do think the roommate makes some good points in that, like her concern for like the possible erasure of like the origins of that, or like where she got it from. And I do think that the writer can take steps to sort of mitigate that or to prevent that from happening. I thought she could like involve the original, like where she got the original idea from, like the ex-roommate.
Yes.
I thought she could link to Black-owned brands. There's just a lot of things that she can do that people can educate themselves on. But like this whole form of erasure and like white creators using Black products being promoted over like Black creators, it's probably not just going to be her fault. It's going to be like the algorithm and like the institution of racism as a whole. Like there's so many things that come into that. And we see it a lot in like TikTok and how different like things can get co-opted and turned into like, oh, this is something this white creator came up with, and then it blows up. And the original creator is not like credited. But yeah, I definitely think she's not the issue in this case, and it's all up to us, like just educate ourselves and see where we are taking space from other people. But yeah, those are my 2 points.
I totally agree with that. And Natalie, I love your points about what she could do better. So she isn't the issue, but it would have been great if she talked about her roommate, if she shared where it came from, if maybe she mentioned some Black-owned brands, etc., just to take things up to the next level. Because quite frankly, we all of us always have space to do better and to improve, and we should take advantage of those opportunities when they are presented to us. In the writer's favor, she did say, well, yeah, I did learn that thing, and I'm going to go back and assign credit and all of those things. So they wanted to do better, and so I concur with the audience, not the issue. And we're almost running out of time, so it's coming up to the end of the session. I'd love to know from you in the chat, if you're feeling brave enough, anything that you're going to take away from today's session. And I'm going to ask our panelists as well, what stood out for you from today? What are some things that you might take away? Christine, I'll come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think, like you just said, we all could improve a lot in just our simple interactions. But I think one of the main things that really came across clear is that not every scenario is going to have a clear-cut answer. And, it's always easy to point fingers and point out where people fell short. But like oftentimes when I bet we've all been in one of these scenarios or similar scenarios where either we were the ones it happened to, or we're the ones that did it. A lot of, when it's real time, anything could happen. And it just, no one's perfect. And it's all, the most important thing is always to be cognizant of that, but also try to be better. And like, when people, like, I feel like a lot of times, especially with people of color, they don't really complain the first time it happens. It's usually after like the third or fourth, or like some repeated where it's like, okay, now I'm gonna like let you know this is not okay. So like, if you notice like you have a repeated behavior of doing something that's not so great, like just change it. And yeah.
Thank you. Natalie, you're up.
I agree with Christine. Be open to feedback and don't get defensive, but rather use it as like a learning moment, like a chance to learn and better yourself. Because we all make mistakes. You know, I know there's ways that I probably have like harmed other people or offended other people, and I'm always taking the time to learn and be better. And we can all do that. Just to easily support one another, and especially in the workplace, I think that's very important to just make it a safe place for people of all races and ethnicities.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Reading from the chat, I think, and this is from Angela, I think a good thing to take away is being aware of any biases lingering in your personal or professional lives and be willing to learn and grow. And we've got another one that says, I am taking away that intention matters, active listening matters, and learning not to take things personally. If something you have said or done upsets someone else, take these experiences as an opportunity to learn about different perspectives and better yourself. Thank you for that. And Fabienne in the chat, I take away an important point from the first scenario, that apologizing isn't enough when we get something wrong, but taking the opportunity to actively make a change is what made a difference. And we've got a comment. This was such a great session. I was listening and I learned a lot. AITA scenarios are the best. Continuous education and learning is absolutely key. And Camilla, just to close, I know we have to come to you to wrap up. What did you learn from today's session?
First of all, thank you, Dana. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Natalie. On behalf of all the audience listening, it was a pleasure and a privilege just to sit and listen. And you did an amazing job as co-hosts. You can come do Kubrick Voices anytime, every time. That'd be great. Listening, it's going back to, I think, especially in scenario 2, that personal choice. As much as we're going to explore all these variety of scenarios and try to build a picture of how we might react to things in the future, it's remembering that every situation is going to be different and everyone's going to have a hot personal take. And so it's not just a cookie cutter, I learned this, I'm going to apply it to this situation and it's going to be the answer. Now that we've discussed these, every person's going to have their own approach, and the active listening part is the best way to navigate those situations. I think I learned a lot more about myself than I thought I would as well, which is great. It's also that we're all human and it's relatable content. I think I hadn't really clocked my last name is anglicized. My grandparents chose to do that, kind of erased our heritage, I guess. I'm kind of grateful. I don't think I would suit Duckstein as a last name. I don't speak German. People might assume that I would. So, it's being able to apply it to yourself, to others, friends and family, and kind of building that really holistic but individualistic perspective on how everyone feels about stuff. I can't thank you guys enough for doing this.
Thanks everyone who listened, for your attention, and we hope to do this again. It was fun.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And hopefully when this comes out at the end of the month, to kind of wrap up Black History Month, you'll share this podcast. You'll happily, promote that you were involved, and share your comments as well. We'd love to spread this as wide as far as we can, because we all had a lot of fun with it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.